Welcome to the Dental Team Podcast. I'm your host, Kiera Dent, and I have this crazy idea that maybe I could combine a doctor and a team member's perspective because let's face it, dentistry can be a challenging profession with those two perspectives. I've been a dental assistant, treatment coordinator, scheduler, biller, office manager, regional manager, practice owner, and I have a team of traveling consultants where we have traveled to over 165 different offices coaching teams. Yep, we don't just understand you, we are you. Our mission is to positively impact the world of dental, and I believe that this podcast is the greatest way I can help elevate teams, grow VIP experiences, reduce stress, and create A-teams. Welcome to the Dental Team Podcast. Hello, Dental Team listeners. This is Kiera, and you guys, I am so jazzed to bring an incredible guest to our podcast today, something that I just think we need more of. So David Siegel is the CEO of Meetup and former CEO of WeWork and Investopedia. David, really, the reason I wanted to bring him on is because he is creating a response to the Great Resignation. We all know hiring's an issue, and David says it is critical for all leaders to find ways of building community in the office and out of the hybrid workforce because it's here to stay, and the resignations will only continue to grow as their rapid pace as communal ties have been severed. So employers need to know that money isn't the only thing keeping employees in the workforce. Burnout is real. So when he emailed in a message in, I was like, absolutely get on the podcast. So welcome to the show, David. How are you today?
So glad to be here and happy to talk about the challenges and resignations, the challenges of motivating people and challenges around making smart decisions.
Oh my gosh, it's so real. So that was my bio on you, but David, you're welcome to bring anything to it, anything you'd love to share, because honestly, I feel like this is such a hot topic that I'm just excited to have somebody who's outside of dentistry come into our dental podcast world and really just give us some insights on how we can make employees want to work for us. Because I think right now it almost feels, while we are a community of dentists and dental practices, it almost feels like it's like a dog-eat-dog world out there of how do we keep and retain employees? They're being poached. I'm like, what has this turned into? Like uncivilized nation out here where it's like put the guards up, get your people off of social media so they want to stay with you. Like it's kind of
that doesn't work.
Right? So teach us your ways, David. I'm so excited to just sit back, learn from you. You've got an incredible book about decisions that we're going to dive into, but let's kind of take this away of like, what can employers do right now to protect their businesses and get employees to want to stay with this whole burnout thing that's coming into play?
Yeah. So first of all, people tend to think that money is the answer. And reason why they oftentimes think that is because when an employee leaves and you say, oh, how come you're leaving? Oftentimes the answer is something like, oh, I was able to get $5,000 or $10,000 somewhere else.
Right.
So because that's an answer that you'll end up hearing, you think, oh, it's because of money. Wrong. When people start looking for a job, and you want to keep them from starting to look because it's so easy to find a job these days. So when people start looking for a job, it's very rarely because of money per se. It's oftentimes the number one reason is because of who someone's manager is. If they have a manager that they trust, which is the number one thing for a manager. I once met with Jack Welch, who is the famous leader of General Electric. And I spent an hour with him one time and I said, and he actually won the award for number one manager in the entire 20th century. I said, what's the most important thing you could tell a manager in terms of keeping their people? He said, everything comes down to employee trust. If you have trust, because so many different things are neither black nor white, good nor bad, everything's gray. And if you could look at through the lens where I trust the person, oh, they did it because they're doing something in my best interest. Or you could do something good for someone. They're like, oh, they're only doing that because of XYZ reason. It's really, and they find a negative way to look at it. And the best way to build trust is really being transparent. It's being as open as possible. So to the extent that dental practices can be open with their teams about what's good that's happening, what's challenging that's happening, be uncomfortable almost in how transparent one's actually being in a business, it tends to build trust because people don't just want to hear the rah-rah good stuff. They want to hear, ultimately what's happening. So the number one reason why people leave is because they don't necessarily trust their manager, which could be that they don't necessarily trust you, because oftentimes you are the person who's managing the business. So that's kind of number one. Number two area that I think is incredibly important for dentists and all small and medium-sized businesses to focus on to help to retain people is building community into your practice. So what do I mean by that? So at Meetup, We're the world's largest platform for building community. We have 56 million members who are part of like 300,000 different communities in 193 countries around the world. So we know
That's
a little
killer.
bit of something.
Like, I just have to interrupt right there. Like, congratulations. That's pretty impressive, because it's funny. My husband and I actually talk about this all the time. And we say so many people are just lonely, and so many people are just looking for friends, looking for someone to do things with. So like, kudos to you guys. Massive, massive kudos on how big that is and what you're trying to do. I support it and endorse it 1,000%.
Thank you, Kiera. And it relates to what we're talking about, the importance of community, because if you look at the statistics, before the pandemic, 46% of people said that they regularly felt lonely. Not sometimes, not occasionally, but regularly. And among people who are Gen Zers, and some of the people that you're looking to hire might be a year, 2, 3, 4 years out of college in the Gen Z kind of time frame, 62% of Gen Zers regularly feel lonely. And this was pre-pandemic. And the pandemic has only added more emotional health and mental health and anxiety issues for so many people. So people are not, the communal breakdown of when people used to go to synagogues and used to go to churches more often and used to go to PTA and all the infrastructure that people had in community is kind of gone. So where are people looking for community? They're looking for it at work. And if they don't have that repartee and that relationship with people, so you might not think it's worthwhile to go bowling with your hygienist and your assistants and your admin team and the other dentists. But you know what? It is important. If you're not into bowling, do an escape room. But find ways of doing things together. And what I oftentimes say is, even if you're not going to go out and do things, people love just eating together. I know it sounds ridiculous, but just bringing in food periodically, just people are appreciative, and it's the kind of thing that can pay for itself. So the two things that I would highlight, much more so than compensation in terms of the Great Resignation, are just that manager trust, number one, and number two is building community into your practice, and then people won't leave. They'll stay there. My father was a neurologist. He built a practice from by himself to 50 different physicians that were in the practice, and he had people staying 10, 20, 30 years. And why? They trusted him and they loved each other. And they didn't want to let each other down. It's like, a sports team. People don't want to let each other down. They don't want to leave for that reason.
So I love this, because I think so many people forgot about being people and human through the pandemic. And so we kind of forgot what makes us human and what makes us tick. What are your suggestions, David, for a lot of virtual companies? Because dentists are lucky. They get to hang out with each other. Selfishly, I'm going to pick your brain right now, because Dental A Team isn't more of a virtual company. But I also know a lot of dental practices out there have remote satellite practices. So they're having to do more on Zoom. What are any ideas to create that community of these virtual companies? Because I think that is something we're finding. I know I'm seeing it with my consultants. I was like, we're throwing on an everyday morning huddle. We're going to have a fun time with each other, because I'm noticing that they're not sticky to the company, because they're just kind of these floating people out there. So what do you do for these virtual companies?
I mean, it's amazing. People who started in April of 2000 and then left, within 2 years or a year and a half, they never stepped foot in a lot of a company. They're just, the only associated with the company is they got a laptop mailed to them. They mail their laptop back, and they get a new laptop sent over to them.
Yep.
And that's like their entire association with the company. It's ridiculous. Okay, so two things I would say to virtual situations. Number one is, one of the things that we try to do at Meetup, and has been very successful, is try to be as empathetic as possible around the real burnout that people feel. So we created something called Wellness Wednesdays. And every Wednesday, we have a different event for all of our people virtually. We have a yoga person come and do a virtual yoga. We have a psychologist come and talk about how parents who are having kids, had kids at home that weren't in school, how do they handle that kind of challenging situation? So we had a different wellness event every single Wednesday. That was one. The second is, as a company, and I think there's many companies out there, they've been able to actually save money, because there's less travel.
Sure.
There's less office expenses. So rather than just taking all that money and just completely pocketing it, we said we're going to take a small portion of that money and give it back to employees. And here's how we're doing it. We created a wellness perk also for employees. And what did that mean? It means people could expense $60 a month, which is real money. It adds up to pre-tax over $1,000 a year, $1,000 a year. and they could get anything they want, whatever they think is wellness. It could be a massage, it could be a bike helmet, it could be going to the movies, it could be what. Wellness is as broadly defined as however anyone wants to define it. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be buying some extra things in a supermarket. They expense it and they're happy. And every time they expense it is this positive association with, I'm able to get $60 this month. And it's just, you can't do it all at once. You have to do it every single month. So it reminds people 12 different times a year of, oh, this company actually does care about me. Now, of course, there's also things that you could do virtually, whether it's like doing online games as a group, which is always fun, interactive game or interactive scavenger hunt. And there's all these different types of things. The reality, though, is for so many people, Zoom fatigue is like serious. And it's like, ooh, do I want to have fun on Zoom again? Or can you have fun on Zoom anymore? I don't know.
Sure.
But what I would say is we also took dollars and we're flying people in.
Yes.
And we're having people get together. And it just goes back to even remote teams like your team and like many dental practices may have, spend the extra money to see people on a quarterly basis, twice a year. For a Christmas party, if you didn't invite spouses or significant others in the past, invite the spouse or significant other this time. Like go above and beyond every time you have an in-person opportunity to try to get that back. And it's amazing. We could see each other sometimes only once a quarter because we're remote, but you could still feel that makes such a big difference just seeing each other once a quarter in person.
Totally. And I'm so glad you talked about that because that is something, not even being like realizing it, I just started to notice that there was not that connection of our team. Our in-person team is a lot closer. There's other things that go on rather than these external teams. So really, that was exactly what I was going to suggest, is making sure you utilize those dollars to bring people in. We try to do at least 2 times a year where we bring everybody together. And then also that daily like check in on Zoom, as silly as it sounds, we have like fun games that we play almost every single morning of like jokes, laughters, just so people feel more connected and they know who each other are rather than it being you're just hanging out in your own virtual world. And then really making sure, my favorite thing is Fun Friday. So I try to do fun things on Friday. That wellness bonus is brilliant. I did an end of year wellness bonus, but I'm starting to see that psychology of every single month. It's just that constant reminder of goodwill into your employees. As crazy as that is, I'm like, and we're going to be changing for 2023. Brilliant. Okay. So that's kind of on this, like you said, have that trust, transparency with managers, and then also do something to build community. I found for dental practices something this year, because a lot of times managers, that's a lot of stress on you, coming up with the bullying activity or coming up with Dip Friday where everyone brings their favorite dip, chip, whatever you want to do, to actually divide it by departments. There's 4 quarters in a year. And so
perfect. Round robin it. Say like, you're in charge of this one, you're in charge of that. And then people feel more ownership of it and they're excited about it.
Totally.
Love that.
Brilliant. Okay. So you also have a book, and I selfishly asked you to talk about this because it's all about decisions. And the reason I asked David pre-show to talk about this is because at my team meeting, we did Patrick Lenciani, 5 dysfunctions. I'm trying to really build this more trust into our team. And so we did like a little variation of the one thing. And what we did is we all said what we thought we were really good at and what we thought that we should improve individually as team members. So I said I thought that I should be a better decision maker, and my team lovingly said, Kiera, you just need to be more direct. So David's got some tips on decisiveness. So I said, can we talk about your book actually on the podcast? Because I need these. And this is guys, I podcast for a reason, so I can meet really cool people like David, make our team better, and pick his brain on how I can be more decisive. So kind of talk to us about this book. I want to know about like decisions, how to make better decisions. I think so many people in the dental office are scared to make the wrong decision. And one of my favorite quotes, I don't know who it is there's more loss through indecision than a wrong decision. So I'm very much aware, but that doesn't mean I execute all the time.
Okay,
So kind of
I
walk
love
us through.
what you're saying. So I'll give you my favorite quote is by Teddy Roosevelt, super related to yours, which is the best decision is a good decision. The next best decision is a bad decision. And the worst decision is no decision. And it's like people's fear of making decisions that it's the wrong decision. They don't understand that by not making a decision, you're actually making a decision. You're making a decision not to make the decision, which oftentimes results in a lost opportunity,
Sure.
or a lack of clarity, or confusion, or everyone marching to different directions. The reason why decision making and being speedy in decision making is so important is because when you decide you're going to focus on something that's, a month, a year from now, 2 years or 5 years from now, you don't actually know what's super important to you in a year, 5 years. You think you know, but it may be not that important. When you focus on what you need in the short term and you focus on what decision you need to make right now, then ultimately the way I tend to think about decisions is every decision I'm going to make is going to be the wrong one. And then I'm going to iterate and I'm going to make it a little better. And I'm going to iterate and I'm going to make it a little better. There's a concept in business, which I'm sure you know, many of your listeners know, of the book, The Lean Startup. Mm-hmm. And in the Lean Startup, it talks about getting something out called an MVP, a minimum viable product. So what you want to do in life is to try to get your decision out there, and then you learn from it, because the goal is learning. So the goal isn't to make the smartest decision, it's to make a decision, learn from it, and get it out there. So the book is called Decide and Conquer. And the thing that I spent a while talking about is really helping people to understand what their decision-making biases are. So Kiera, we'll do this together,
okay, I'm going to
name those 4 common biases, and maybe you can tell me, for you, which one is the bias that you think you oftentimes have the most. You ready?
This is live coaching, guys. I can't even wait. I'm ready. I'm so ready for this.
Okay, here they are. 4 most common biases. So the first one is recency bias. So what recency bias is you just, let's say, broke up with a boyfriend, or you just had to let go of someone on your team. You're going to overemphasize that exact experience that you just had as the last one versus the 10 previous people that you may have gone out with, or that might have been on the team. And you're going to try to find the exact opposite of like whatever that one most recent thing is. The reason why people that are into yoga, as I am, if you love Shavasana at the end, because it's like, oh, it's relaxing. And then when you finish, you're like, oh, I think I'm going to do yoga again, because you just enjoy the whole Shavasana exercise. And it was just super, super pleasant an experience. So that's like that recency bias. That's number 1. Okay. Number 2 is confirmation bias. So what confirmation bias is people's inclinations to just look for opinions that are similar to their own, and that confirm their own opinions. And the danger of that, of course, is that better decisions get made when you have people disagree with you and have different perspectives than you. So confirmation bias is, for me, it's when I'm looking at my stock portfolio and I know it's a good day in the market. I look at it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm such a great investor. Look at me. And then it's down. I'm like, I'm not going to look at that. I don't want to see anything negative. I just want things that confirm how great I think I already am. So first is recency. Second is confirmation bias. Third is status quo bias, which is people's inclination to just stick with a bad situation because there's fear of the unknown and just sticking with the status quo. And then the fourth is sunk cost fallacy, which is basically people not appreciating that you just put a lot of time and energy and effort into something. You just spent $10,000 on a piece of dental equipment, and now it's like, now I have to use it. Well, you should use it if it's the right thing for your business. You already spent it. So, when you go to a restaurant, you don't have to eat all the food in the restaurant just because you bought the food. If it makes you unhappy, just understand that there's a sunk cost you already put in there. So are you most subject, Kiera, to recency bias, sunk cost bias, status quo bias, or confirmation bias?
Hello, Dental Team listeners. What would it take for you guys to just completely and utterly change your practice? Like truly, if you think about it, because for me, I know oftentimes it's just having somebody right by my side, pushing me along, holding me accountable, having somebody to spin ideas off of. And honestly, that's all it takes most of the time for us to go from good to great. Usually it's taking the knowledge that we learn and actually executing it. That's why I would love to invite you to join our Platinum Virtual, where we do a coaching call, a Zoom team training. We invite you to our community, and we just really dive deep with you. We're that partner right by you to help you go from good to great. So if you're wanting to join, take your practice to the next level, and you know it's time for you to implement, execute, and go to that next level, email us hello@thedentalteam.com, and I would be so excited to welcome you as our newest Platinum Virtual member. Can't wait to see you there. Oh, dang. I have to confess this. It's surely status quo. 100%. As soon as you said that, I thought that's honestly what I do is like, well, we might as well just stick with what we've got because I'm afraid of like what if I hire a worse hire? Or what if this shifts and changes? Or what if we lose clients? Or what if our clients don't like this new one? I'm not scared of like, I'm not going to just use things because I bought it. It's like, we're going to make that better. Recency sometimes, but at the same time, I always feel like we're going to level up. But it's honestly that fear of the unknown of what's going to happen that really does hold me back. As you said that, I was like, oh shoot, that's it. That's me.
But I'm sure you could think of examples in your life where you had that fear, you started a podcast, or you had that fear, you took a new job, and you're like, what? And the thing that drives me always when I say to myself afterwards, what took me so long?
Mm-hmm.
You do something and you're like, I don't know what took me so long being in this relationship for as long as it did. What took me so long to end, or what took me so long to end this job that I was not that happy in, and I think if you do that enough times and you start asking yourself, what took me so long? It's like, oh, I know what took me so long. My fear, my anxiety, fear of the unknown, etc. So it's good. It's just important to recognize those biases because it's kind of the first step to being able to combat them.
For sure. Well, and as you said that, I just thought, I'm going to spin it back to you because here's my real question is, I don't think I actually have a fear around myself. So if it's me, that's going to sound very selfish, guys. I'm not trying to be like egotistical over here. But as you said, I'm like, I'm actually not scared of like starting the podcast or ending the podcast or changing things that I have control over because I know if I bet on myself, like I'm a type A, we're going to win. It's in my blood. Like I grew up with 4 brothers. I'm highly competitive. Like you better believe I'm going to freaking win. But when it's up against other people and there's that variable of like, how is this person going to respond or how is this person that I almost want to just stay status quo with team members.
Yeah.
Like, don't rock that boat. So do you have any like tips or advice? I mean, guys, this is for all the status quo or biasers out there. Everyone else, sorry about that. This is my own personal session with David, guys. You can call up David, read his book on your own. What would you say?
Get on the couch and we'll do some coaching right now.
Perfect. Ready.
So first of all, the first thing I try to do is I recognize the fact that if things aren't, let's say, working, more often than not, your team and your employees know that.
Sure.
Like a lot of times people think that they could, let's say, hide something or not hide it, but like something's not necessarily working in their organization and they're the only ones that know that it's not working. More often than not, most people know. The reason I start with that is because once you realize that other people know that there's a challenge and there's a problem, and the status quo is imperfect for sure, it makes it a lot easier to be able to acknowledge it and talk about it with people. And a lot of times when I do that, they're like, I'm so glad you brought that up. Yes, thank you. And I just do it in like a conversational kind of way. You don't want to do this like big reveal, but so you just bring up, ask questions of people. So do you think that, we're really getting the same levels of engagement on our podcast that we used to be getting, or do you think that we need to, switch it around a little bit, So asking those questions, giving people the opportunity to be vulnerable themselves by you being vulnerable, allows people to open up. And then once people open up, then it's a lot easier to drive change. If people think that nothing's wrong, it's very hard to drive change because like nothing's wrong. But once you know that, why are you changing it? But once you get people to acknowledge that things are kind of broken, oh, by the way, in all relationships and in all companies, there's plenty of things that are broken. It makes it a lot easier to then talk about making what changes should be made. So that's one thought. The second thing that we do at Meetup is every month we have a special meeting just dedicated to like, what do we need to pivot and change in our company? Purposely, because it makes it a lot easier to then talk about it because that's the entire goal of the conversation. And people aren't scared of like, oh, why are we talking about this? Because it's a standard process that we always talk about.
That's really, really smart. And I'm going to tie this actually, ironically, back to what you talked about with managers, because I was like, oh, son of a gun. That means like that transparency of having that trust within an organization. So David, let's say hypothetical, you're talking to a girl on a podcast. Her name happens to be Kiera Dent, and she happens to be in for needing an intervention today. How do you even start this transparent conversation? You're afraid of the status quo, which is ultimately what holds me back from wanting to have certain conversations. But now I'm hearing like, well, that could actually be why team members might not be as bought into the company. That might be why they might be leaving, because there isn't this transparency, this trust. How do you even start opening up to have it? Because it's like, you've been just status quo for so long. And they're like, hey guys, I heard this really great podcast and I'm going to start just like telling y'all everything that's on my mind. We're going to start having these conversations.
Oh, you could do that. I mean, you could literally play the podcast and be like, hey, I listened to this. And you know what? I realized what I like to do is talk about my mistakes. Because I think when I talk about my mistakes, and I try to do that in the book a lot, it opens up other people to talk about their fears and mistakes too. So if I'm in a conversation, I'll say something like, I feel like I've made a mistake in the past and not being and not talking about things that might be uncomfortable topics, not talking about things that might be going wrong and not talking about challenges enough, not talking about things that I think maybe we could improve upon. So I really want to change that. And here's something from my perspective that I think. So I try to lead by example and say something there. What thoughts do you have? What thoughts do you think that we get people that changes? You don't want to be manipulative, but to the extent that you're able to get someone to suggest an idea that is consistent with what you already believe and have them contribute towards it and it comes from them as opposed to it coming from you, it's always going to be a better situation. So if you have an intervention you want to do with someone, they need to work on something, they need to change something, admitting some challenges of your own, getting them to talk about what changes could be made, and then seeing how solutions can come from them as opposed to being top down from you. That's always the best approach.
Totally. And
taking the long game. You don't have to solve it in one conversation. Like you have the kickoff conversation, and then you have a follow-up conversation a couple of weeks later. And it's okay for things to take a little longer. Sometimes slow is fast, and sometimes you do things too fast and things just get out of control and it could be slower.
Sure. Well, and I really love that you talked about like the long game perspective rather than short term, because I think that this is shifting culture. If I'm completely upfront, like it feels like it's a shift of culture. Like what are these biases as to why we're not maybe making as many decisions? What are these different ways that we can keep and retain team members? Because right now, like you said, burnout is real. The Great Resignation is not just something we heard about. Like it is a real deal. That I think that this is a shift of culture. And I think if leaders who are listening and team members who are listening really take it on of, okay, we're going to start working on this. Like, I don't want to be the person who doesn't make decisions because of this bias, because I get that it's going to hold our whole team back. So we're going to start shifting culture, and it's going to be uncomfortable for me, guys. Like I'm a strong eye on the disc personality.
I love that. When you're able to say it's going to be uncomfortable for me, guys, that's important because that's leadership. It's talking about how you feel. And I really, the other thing I forgot to mention, but I really want to, before we finish, I just want to share this one last one, which is making it perfectly acceptable and even championing someone who makes a mistake and it fails. The reason why people have status quo bias is they're afraid of making mistakes and failing, or they're afraid of what the implications will be to that mistake. Oh, I did this, now I'm fired. What I try to do is, let's say someone makes a mistake. I will go to them and say, is it okay? I want to mention your mistake in front of the entire company. And I want to applaud you for it because you tried, you made a decision, it didn't work out, but that's okay. Are you okay with us with us giving that example? And I'm going to give you an award, like the Good Mistake Award. The more that you ensure that people are comfortable making mistakes, there's less fear about it. And then you're able to make decisions faster, because what keeps people from making fast decisions is fear of some kind of retribution. Eliminate that as a fear and good things will happen.
Which is really, really, really smart. And I love that you brought that up, because it is important to make these decisions. It is important to move things along. And I really just, I mean, I'm looking up at your book, guys. So it's on Amazon. It says Decide and Conquer 44 Decisions That Will Make or Break All Leaders. If you want to like send me a signed copy, David, I won't say no to it.
Done.
Done.
I'll get your address right after this. I will get you a signed copy.
I mean, I secretly love signed books by authors because it's just fun. But also I love that it's 44 decisions that will make or break all leaders. And I'm assuming, I haven't read your book yet. I will be. I can't wait to get it. But really helping to just kind of go through the process. I would imagine those 44 decisions really are taking almost, I'm a big checklist girl, so I love that it's the 44 decisions.
There's lots of checklists, exactly.
Which is beautiful. So you can just check it off. So I would say if, that's why I'm literally saying like, hey, David, it's an intervention. I don't even know you until today, but I'm so glad we met. I need this intervention. But really finding a way, I personally think that good leadership is decisive leadership. And I just talked about my like path to optimize leadership this last weekend. And truth be told, one of the key points, I had 7 of them on a circle, and one of them is execution. And execution can only come from clear decisions. So I really love these items. So David, if I'm a practice and I want to utilize Meetup, how does Meetup work? Can like people use it in their practices? How does that actually work?
Yeah, so we have a few thousand. We have a B2B business, a few thousand clients in it, and what they do is they say, I want to build a community and a brand and a following around kind of a passion of one of our teams. It could be related to dentistry, but it could also be related to something else. Like if a dental practice has someone that's very into running, or that's very into hiking, or that's very into learning a language, you could basically create a meetup group. And then what Meetup does is we go to our 56 million people and find people who share the same passions that you share. So your group could be about, it could be about better business practices or office management, or who knows what it could be. And we know so much about all of our people and all of our members that we have really good machine learning and artificial intelligence that we use to find the exact right people that would want to join your group. And you could decide that your group should be a virtual group and you could get people from all around the globe, or you want to be in a specific city and have events be in person. And then ultimately that's what we do. We have, these hundreds of thousands of communities and millions of people, who share passions around, loving horror flicks or loving networking or, whatever the area may be.
That's awesome. And I just popped on Meetup right now, typed into my city, and there's quite a few activities and events. So I think for all those practices are wanting to find events quarterly, have places to go, it can be a really fun thing. Like I was like, oh, I didn't even know that was in my city. There's all sorts of things in there, like crafting. I truly didn't even know people were doing these things all around. So like for you personally to find friends to hang out with, but also for your practices and just a good way for you guys to get people. I really love it, David. So I would say my takeaways are, number 1, you've got to have a transparent culture if you want to retain team members. Number 2, you've got to build a community if you want to retain team members and have it a place where people genuinely want to be. They love each other. They're invested in one another. And then really deciding and conquering, like all those different pieces, being a better decision maker, executing more consistently on those decisions, not second guessing based on those biases, but recognizing them, identifying them, and overcoming them would kind of be my key takeaways. David, anything you want to add to that wrap up of today's podcast?
No, I could see why you're a podcast host. You nailed it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, it was a really fun one. I love, like I said, guys, I wanted to bring someone on who's not in dentistry because I think so often we get stuck in our niche of dentistry and, okay, let's talk about new patients. Let's talk about how we're going to hire. Let's write the same posts as everybody else. Let's actually talk to other people outside of the industry. What are other businesses doing to keep teams around? What are other managers doing that are successful managers outside of dentistry? What are people doing to make better decisions, to be better leaders? These are 3 great resources for you guys to be able to access, implement, and execute on so you can grow to the next level. I think right now this is knowledge. Now are you going to actually execute on it, or is it just going to be passing knowledge? So David, what do you have on that?
Oh, I just want to say I really want to do a shout out to Carlo Passis, who's my dentist of the last 10 years. I saw him this morning and I walked in and he goes, David, I just bought your book. I'm like, how did you even know about the book? He said, oh, for my daughter, we're trying to build more confidence, and I found confidence, and I know that I need to help people to make smarter decisions around confidence. So I absolutely love him. I literally am that guy that looks forward to going to the dentist. And part of that is because he's so kind, and he runs his dental practice so thoughtfully, and he really does. I feel like I'm part of like the extended family. So all the things that you said are just really important. And like you said, it's easy to just have a narrow focus. It's important to look and learn from different organizations that are out there. And hopefully people can take advantage of Meetup, download the app, because that's a great way to learn about things. And hopefully everyone can decide and conquer.
Totally. So David, if people want more information, they want to find out more about Meetup, they want to find your book. Like I said, guys, it's on Amazon. Kudos to you, David. It's got even an audio book. Did you record it yourself? Are you the author? Because I hear that
I
takes
picked out the author.
Okay,
they said
good.
I was a little too nasally. But yeah, he's really good. The audio, the Kindle is obviously easy to read. But the audiobook is actually getting a ton of people listening to it. People love audiobooks.
I seriously do. I like crank that up on like 4, 5, 6 times, like as fast as I can possibly get it without feeling like it's chipmunks in my ear. And I keep like trying to push it to the next limit. But that's honestly how I consume it. So guys, like go check it out on Amazon. Decide and Conquer, really fun. David, and guys, download that Meetup app. Like I said, I just looked it up and found things to do in our city, which I'm actually really excited to take our HQ crew to, because I didn't even know they existed. And like I said, if you didn't know me in 2020, I had a goal of making one friend. I think Meetup is a great way for you to find people, just as a personal goal. Because like you said, so many people are just lonely, isolated. And I think social media, while it has the intention of bringing us together, I think it actually can isolate us a lot. So having that true human connection, we're getting to do it. David, I just appreciate all the things that you've brought, and I'm excited to read your book and share more with our community. So guys, take a look. And David, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Absolutely. All right, guys, decide and conquer. Make sure you guys are not part of the Great Resignation. And as always, thank you for listening. And I'll catch you next time on the Dental 18 podcast. And that wraps it up for another episode of the Dental 18 podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.